Time's just gone 9 o'clock. I'm going to hand the rākau kōrero over to Councillor Akuhata Brown to begin us off with a karakia this morning. Microphone, my friend.
Atamari e koutou, mino e tātou. He honore he kororia ki te atua. He mangarongo ki te whenua. He whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Hanga e te atua he ngākau hau. Ki roto ki tina o mātou. Whakatungia tō wairua tapu. Hei awhina, hei tohu i a mātou. Hei ako hoki i ngā mahi mō tēnei rā. Āmeni. Honour and glory to God, peace on earth, goodwill to all people. Develop a new heart inside of all of us. Install in us your sacred spirit. Help us, guide us, and all the things we need to learn today. We ask also that you be with those who are not well and those who are travelling in this community. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Akuhata Brown. I want to thank you for the karakia this morning. Greetings to those who are in attendance, from the press to our staff, and also to our councillors and anyone that's zooming in online. I will begin our hui off. Do we have any apologies for today? Is the Mayor expected to zoom in? Maybe so moved second. All those in favour? Aye. All those opposed? Carried. Any declarations of interest? None. If there are none, I'll take us to page 5 of the council, which are the council minutes. Moved by Councillor Burdett, seconded by Councillor Worsnop. Any matters arising? If there are no matters arising, then I put the min. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cranston.
What's the status of the Code of Conduct review?
Through the chair on page 3.2 of the action sheet, it provides an update on the Code of Conduct review, with the draft Code of Conduct being prepared for workshopping in early next month.
Early
November.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll put the minutes. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Action sheet.
Can I just point out on action item 11.2 that this will be a long-term program of work. So I'm going to suggest that that comes off the action sheet as an action item, and we'll provide regular updates as we progress through.
What's the price of the date of December?
Microphone, Councillor Cranston. Microphone. Sorry. Any questions in regards to the action sheet? Councillor Seymour?
Cranston finished.
Oh no, his microphone was left on.
Oh right,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 6 on page 13, the deputation from the McAvoy residents around the vehicle use on the beach, which puts beach users at risk. Can I ask what's going to happen about that, please? And it's dated.
Yeah, so through the chair, we will need to consider that alongside the other priorities of work that we've got on by way of any bylaws or the TRMP review. So it's a wider discussion. Then this particular action item is closing that loop back to them, saying that the councillors heard them, and in terms of next steps, we will need to consider that, or you will need to consider how much of that is a priority and what drops off the work program.
Supplementary, I appreciate that entirely, and thank you for that. But I just want to flag that I have raised it over the last year intermittently when there's been an opportunity. The community came, and in fact, I had a phone call this morning asking me what the status was. And I know it's a big piece of work, but I want to flag that it does need to include those other beaches that I've raised before. Anara have a concern about bikes on that beach and the dotterels that nest there. And so it is a wider piece of work, but it is something that this council should face up to, that other councils do have a process in place that allows people to launch their boat, but not drive at speed. And the residents of Makarori, which is a beach that we specifically recognise as a day beach, a day users beach, especially the very beginning of Makarori Road, where there's no houses immediately in front of it. Many families go and park there and then sit on the beach because it's quite a nice wide area of sand and lots of people surf. It would be a disaster if somebody was hit by one of the speeding vehicles. So whether in the beginning it can be some signage to flag that this beach is for day users and vehicles should restrict their speed or something to that effect. Because what I hear you say, it could be a couple of years before this council moves fast enough, as I alluded to yesterday, to get something done in our big work plan. So could we perhaps look at signage?
What we can commit to is having a paper just outlining some of the measures that we can put in place. Just in terms of signage, I have in the pipeline a request, particularly around the raising awareness and education of the importance of our dunes.
Yes.
Having kind of noticed people ripping them up and then
Absolutely.
yeah, so that is in the pipeline, but I think a bigger discussion around what we're trying to achieve here by way of a bylaw and the monitoring and enforcement accountability that comes with new bylaws are in place. So we can provide that in the new year, but just note that a dunes kind of education program is in train with signage.
But can I ask again, sorry to be a pain, what time frame is in train likely to mean? Is there potential to get some signage for the protection of families that use the beach for this summer?
I would have to go and ask the team in terms of what they're currently working on.
So would you come
how
back to
soon
us
we
on
will
that,
do
please?
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Because that and the protection of the dunes from those hoons at the other end of the beach is actually, they are full of water. It's all very well for people to laugh. They are full of water like this. It's absolute degradation of the dunes from the rain of the last few days. And that was a topic of about 2 months ago. Some signage, if it's in the pipeline, would be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Councillor Dowsing, and then Councillor Kotsuba.
Thank you, and through the chair, I just want to support Councillor Seymour in that we're not really, we're not questioning what operational matters we can do to support this space. We want to talk, from a governance side. We just want to stress the importance of dune protection and moving as rapidly as we can on acknowledging those safety concerns. It's a matter for us that we noticed in several articles coming up in front of us, including the freedom camping bylaw and the dune protection around that area. This has been in front of us a number of times now as well, and we just want to see from this side of the table, we want to acknowledge that it's a serious issue and we want to push forward as quickly as possible.
Yeah, also just contributing to that conversation as well. Fully support a report coming back, particularly with a focus on safety of our people and safety of our environment. Do you have something to add also? Microphone, please.
And debate in full the consequences of what is being proposed by council.
Yeah, that's what.
Because of 2 reasons. I see people there gathering seaweed. I also see the beach races there, and I see the horses on the beach. So if you're going to have a blanket, no vehicles, you need to look right across the board. And my last part of this is every beach in our district has vehicles on it at one time or another, getting kaimana or whatever. So we need to have a thorough.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Supplementary to Councillor Burdett's comment, I think that's what the Chief Executive is saying is the longer term issue.
Yeah.
The signage is something that we're asking for promptly to protect people and the dunes, all those issues. And there can be access to a beach specifically to launch your boat and remove it. It's the driving up and down at speed and threatening families.
Yes.
That's the issue.
Yeah, exactly. It's the safety stuff, not the access to the kapata kai, the kaimoana stuff. Councillor Kotsuba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really wanted to acknowledge our CE in respect to the 11.2 discussion, and thank you, of course, for this long-term actioning, having met together with the collective group. But I just want to say thank you, and to that, I just wanted to ask, will this collective group want to see any reporting back respective to those meetings to discuss that? The issue being the ongoing institutional racism, unpacking this journey we're on. So what would be the expectation to full council in line with that committee's work? I wasn't sure, admittedly, after saying, yeah, we can't just put it into a dated, because it's an ongoing. But firstly, thank you. And secondly, is there an expectation from this council to be given feedback or given a report on that journey?
In regards to the
So I can't speak on behalf of what your desire is as elected members in terms of reporting requirements, but my intention is to provide updates through the Chief Executive report. And if there are any implications, as you would have read through the policy, the policies that we have put forward on the agenda today, that would then come back to council to amend or update the policy as we require. Or if there are any quite significant areas of work that are coming through that the council needs to be in the loop of. But my intention would be also to bring back that work program once we've workshopped that and we know what that looks like.
My apologies, I wouldn't expect you to speak on behalf of, but yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Akuhata-Brown. I also want to acknowledge your worship, the Mayor, who is attending online. We can now see you. Good morning. If there's nothing else from our action sheet, I'll move us on to our governance work plan. Page 14. If there's nothing there, I'll move us on. Okay. I'll move us to, sorry, see. Councillor Faulkner.
To include the Code of Conduct workshop in this work plan, or is it not the right place to have that?
No, yeah, that's separate committee, so it comes under. Yes. No, it's an important consideration for us to keep ahead of ourselves. All right, so I'll move on to leave of absence so we accept the leave of absence for Councillor Foster, moved by Councillor Burdett, seconded by Councillor Gregory. Those in favour? Against? Carried. No acknowledgements and tributes today. No public input or deputations. We do have one extraordinary business item. I'd like to recommend that, do I have a mover that we accept, moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Akuhata-Brown, accepting this late item. We'll visit this late item. It's the Wastewater Management Committee member appointment. We'll visit this late item at the end of our public agenda. No notices of motion or adjourned business. I'd like to take us to page 15, the Significance and Engagement Policy Review. As with all policies, there's probably questions and kōrero. I'm going to be running it quite tightly and in an orderly fashion. So everyone will get a go, and if you want to have another go, you have to go to the back of the line to get another go. Anyway, I'll hand this over to yourselves.
Morena koutou. So the key bits for this policy in terms of changes for the significance and engagement were around adding in a section around the higher lower guidance for each of the significance criteria, which we see in the Appendix 3. We did some amendments around the structure of the policy, a little bit of the readability, and then the other main change to look through was around the engagement section and updating it in regards to it reflecting the council's approach with the three-phase approach that we use for engaging on items. So those are really the key points that I wanted to point out, but happy to take questions.
Do we have any questions or kōrero in regards to this policy? Councillor Akuhata-Brown.
It's just regarding in your background summary, point 1, the role of council. Just that statement about must consider the needs of people currently living here, as well as those who will live here in the future. And I just have met with a couple of community groups that see themselves in minority spaces, be it how they've formed. And I wanted to know, how do we ensure that we are collectively gathering the aspirations or hopes of those who come from other parts of the globe that have moved to region? I mean, obviously, we as individuals meet, I've met so many people from South America and Nepal even, et cetera, et cetera. And so minority communities, how do we access or have a ways to ensure that they feel they can make a contribution, if you like, to the region, et cetera?
Through the chair, so in that particular paragraph that's been referenced there, that's around the sustainable development principle, around the, you know, the people here now and into the future, not necessarily a reference to minority cultures. With regard to that, the council doesn't have a particular strategy that it uses in terms of engaging with minority cultures. It would take an approach that, depending on the topic or subject matter, as outlined in the significance and engagement policy, that's the way we would conduct our engagement. That being said, we're open to suggestions if there are any good practice models around that would assist staff in engaging in particular areas, but as I say, we haven't got a strategy on that.
Oh, thank you. Madam. See, I guess I've met with a personnel from government who works with ethnic communities, so perhaps I can bring her in and introduce her to this space. Maybe that's a starting point, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other questions or kōrero? Go Councillor Robinson and Councillor Dowsing.
So I went through the attachment. There's a number of questions I have arising from it, and I don't know whether it's easier to raise them now or just maybe liaise directly with the team and pass on my comments. But I guess some of the key ones would be page 30 of 86. It says councillors' obligations to Māori and Tairāwhiti. Now, my understanding of our LGA obligations to Māori, I don't understand that to be defined geographically. I would say that councillors' obligations to Māori, obviously our area of influence is Te Tairāwhiti, but I wouldn't say that we only have an obligation to Māori and Tairāwhiti, but the law says we have an obligation to Māori, not Māori and Tairāwhiti. There's a distinction further down that page. It says below the box, any changes to legislation may require review of policies and processes for engaging with tangata whenua and Māori. And I wonder why there was a distinction between tangata whenua and Māori. I can understand mana whenua, maybe, and tangata whenua, but I could understand why there was a distinction there.
Yeah, well, I'll get
Sorry?
Madam C to respond as she goes through, otherwise
Yeah,
we might
otherwise I'll
miss
get
out a
lost
question.
with the
Yeah.
list of questions. So if I can just respond to those first two, and then we can come back to the rest. So the council has obligations to Māori and Tairāwhiti. Yes, the Gisborne District Council does to Māori and Tairāwhiti, not Māori generally across New Zealand. So that is within your defined Gisborne District Council region. There would be no reason why this council would have obligations to Māori outside of the that do not live in Tairāwhiti. Do you understand?
I would argue with that insofar as if we had a policy which disadvantaged Māori in general, then that policy would affect Māori visiting Tairāwhiti who may not be living here, but because we have a policy which disadvantages Māori, and our obligations under the LGA, I understand, are not to Māori in a specific rohe, but to Māori. But that's just a probably
Semantics, I mean, like it.
Maybe a more philosophical thing than anything else.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And then, sorry, can I just come back to the difference between, so the reference to tangata whenua and Māori, so in the RMA it specifically references tangata whenua, so we need to be really clear about our dual obligations here, which is why it's used both.
Page 24, listing the strategic assets. It talks about council's investment in community housing, third bullet point up from the bottom of that list of strategic assets. Is that correct insofar as our CCTO owns the housing? I mean, you could say
So, sorry, through the chair, the CCTO does not own
Oh,
our
they don't,
community
sorry.
housing. They manage it on behalf of the council.
Then, okay, next question down, the next bullet point is councils share in substantive council-controlled organisations. Why is there substantive in there, to qualify as substantive? And is that defined? I couldn't see a definition for that, so I wonder why you say substantive CCTOs.
Yeah, so it's substantive in terms of the types of it's council-controlled organisations as a whole, not just CCTOs. So that's the substantive added in there so that it's a particularly for preference to the types of council-controlled organisations where they're part of their purposes around returning dividends, etc., as opposed to there can be some CCOs which may have other purposes. So is my understanding like less? Sorry. Yeah, but we can add a definition in there around substantive to make it clearer.
Working up 4 or 5 bullet points, the bullet point dealing with the sewage collection, treatment, disposal, and given this is a review and it's not expected to be reviewed again for, I think, further 3 years, is it prudent to add in there at the end of treatment station out for and any treated water network, in the anticipation that we may have something as a strategic asset, treated water being online within the period before the next review of this? So I would certainly say our treated water from the tertiary upgrade is a strategic asset. A future, a forward-looking strategic asset.
I think I understand through the chair what you mean by that. I think the implication of including that would mean if the council had an alternative use for that treated water, then under this policy we would be required to undertake special consultative procedure in order for it to be used and applied by a third party, for example. So if that is the intention of council or the will of council, then yes, we can include that, but it creates, so the purpose of listing these strategic assets is that the council can't do anything unless it undertakes specific engagement and consultation. But if that's your intention, if we are able to treat that water, if we were to then on-sell that water, we would then have to undertake a consultation process if you wanted to list it here.
Which would be relevant if, for example, Tangata Whenua claim for water got some ground between now and next time it's up for review. So there is a whole lot of rationale maybe for including it at this point, from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable adding something in kind of last minute without having it being something fuller coming back to us to inform our thinking around the inclusion of that. I mean, I do feel that if the concern is around our Māori engagement, that's dealt with in kind of more higher level policies and also in other more substantive places like the definition in regards to significance and engagement with and our obligation to tangata whenua and Māori and tai rāwhiti. I think that's probably adequately captured there. So that's just my thoughts in regards to adjusting that. I don't want to have any unintended consequence without us actually fully being abreast of the information and the issues. Were there any other points there, Councillor Robinson?
Just some typos on page 23.
Those can be emailed through. Anything else?
Let me just check again. No, I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robinson. We'll go Councillor Dowsing, Councillor Gregory, then Councillor Faulkner. So moved by Councillor Faulkner.
A second.
Second by Councillor Dowsing. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Just on the purpose of this document, and it's really around the what we're trying to achieve from the principles of this document. And one thing I feel that is lacking, and perhaps is something that could be considered, as I don't know whether it would become something that's in this document or something that our engagement teams look to improve on, but identifying what portions of our community are responding to engagement and seeing if there's a deficit in particular areas of our community and being able to put more effort into achieving consultation or balance consultation across the community. We can't always get a profile of who's responding, but where we can, we should at least try to understand if we're missing areas of society that aren't contributing. And I didn't know whether it was best fit in this document or best fit externally. Beyond that, I was fairly happy, and unlike Councillor Robinson, I think that when we make additions to our strategic assets, we should be going back to these documents and including them at that stage, understanding what needs to be included, but not preempting those decisions to build. And beyond that, yes, I just think that we have had some failures in our decisions to consult with Tangata and Iwi in the past, and it felt a little light in here in light of the fact that we've got an entire document around decision making after this as well. But decision making and engagement are very different things. And whilst it was in this document, I felt that we needed to emphasise that we need to improve our process of identifying when it is significant, and make sure that we do it right. Thank you.
Did you want a response to were you going to respond to what Councillor Dowsing had brought up at the start?
Yes, so for both of those points, that would be about the practice as opposed to the policy itself.
Councillor Gregory, then Councillor Burdett.
Thank you. I just wanted to say this is a big job, and I feel it's been really well done. The changing of the wording to make it easier to comprehend and read. Yeah, I just think overall, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. Councillor Burdett.
Mr. Chairman, bottom of page 18, top of page 19, in terms of our engagement with the community, and the wider community is coupled together. I just want an assurance from the CEO that we will go out and actually consult with the wider community. And I talked briefly about the trip we made. We bypassed Victoria, we bypassed Tipi. We were far too early in the day at the Hinamori. It didn't suit, people were out working. These are the sorts of things that we should be conscious of going forward when we go out to engage, consult on a long-term plan. There will be issues, but I just hope our staff have got this in mind, and if possible, you could be present, and the meeting.
And also ourselves as councillors.
Those northern communities appreciate the fact that you are there when you can be.
Thank you, Councillor Burdett. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Worsnop.
Yep, thank you. So I pulled, I think, probably one main thing out of here, just as a query and a couple of minor points. So my main, I think my main thrust was on page 23 at the bottom of that page. There's an area that's been removed that I think should remain. It's the bit where it talks about council officers need to think about the 6 criteria themselves, and at the final, the final emphasis of where the significance falls ultimately comes back to the councillors. And I think if you remove that, then it takes some of the onus off us to critically think about the way it's been put to us. And while, yes, we trust our staff to make a decision on what they recommend to be the significance, I think we should keep some responsibility ourselves for seeing whether or not we judge the, collectively, we agree that that significance does reflect whatever it is that we're looking at. Just purely because I think it should be shared between, whoever's put the paper and the table itself, so that we can't then point the finger and go, oh, you didn't tell us it was significant enough. Actually, we're responsible for using our own judgment as well. Also on page 23, where we talk about, it's point 3.1, and there's a bunch of bullet points there. We talk about being, looking at the impacts on councils, long-term plan, et cetera, do we need to add in the spatial plan, because that we now have one, whereas when this draft was, when this document was, obviously last updated, there wouldn't have been one. So is that relevant?
So that one would be covered under the council's current strategies and policies, but if you want to have a specific reference to the spatial plan in particular, you can add that in.
No, it's more a case of just did it merit listing along with all the other things? And sorry.
Just before you continue, did you want to respond? Did you guys have a response in regards to Councillor Worsnop's comment around the re-inclusion of those paragraphs?
I can add in the sentence in particular we were talking about in terms of the joint responsibility. It isn't necessarily a policy thing though, like that is very much.
It's more guidance for week 3 policy.
Microphone, Councillor. Okay.
I had something else here as well. Sorry, my dots on tap and my computer seem to be having a slight meltdown, so everything's very slow. And just on page 22, what do we mean by engagement? I wondered if the emphasis should be a little bit more on, while we are seeking information from the community, we're also sharing information. Kind of, it should be an and, I think. It's probably, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily want to change what we're proposing, but they do want to know, and they consider that engagement. So I know that our definition is very much about getting information to inform what we do. Is there a place for, engagement also, to me, the definition is it's putting information out and getting information back.
It does say they're all providing the community information on the outcome, or do you mean like and, so changing all to and? Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Sheldrick.
Thank you. I found this really interesting sort of read, and I concur with Councillor Gregory. Seems to be an awful lot of work that comes out well. I look forward to seeing it without all the alterations.
Yeah.
And just seeing it
Bit tricky to
as
read.
it is. And it could have been quite helpful actually to see the version separate. Thank you.
Yes, please.
No, so that was purely, Charlotte did ask me about that. I said no, because your agenda then ends up being quite long. Anyway, by the point.
No. There's no one now. Because Councillor Faulkner hasn't had a go yet, and then I'll go to Councillor. Oh, okay, then. Okay,
Yeah, my
yep.
apologies. I should have asked the few that I had, but that's all good. Listen, I'm just really grateful for this work that has been done, and yeah, thank you. I just wondered in it, because since being here at the table 7 years now, this process has been really fascinating. I always wondered about the significance, who chose the low, medium and high in respect to it. And I was always, fascinated as to, who determines that significance. And in the time I've been here, we've obviously seen the community at times speak very strongly to issues they believe they didn't have a chance to have a speaking, or, chance to come in here. And I just wondered, do we have enough data to also acknowledge the changing tide of generations? Because, there are collective communities, be it tangata whenua, who never thought they could come into the space to share their views and thoughts. And so they didn't. I was part of a voter participation project, because we were trying to figure out why people didn't vote, and a lot of that was about the past, legislative kind of things, and so how we change that group's knowledge. And I see this work as part of that, where we're actually making a bigger, solid effort to get people to understand this is theirs too. And so, the iterations of change that I've seen. So I'm really just grateful that we are getting to a point of knowing certain things flare up as such, and our process gets challenged And I'm seeing us work harder to ensure we don't have to have silent protests or, and that's what we're learning, I guess. So I'm just, my kind of thoughts on this were that overall we've come a long way, and we've still got a long way to go, of course, but we are working harder to ensure the significance of issues that, come up in this space. Our community have a voice and feel they can come into this place. So just really thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to, without all the read, but for the work that you're doing, Charlotte. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Faulkner, closing remarks.
Thank you. I actually quite like having the changes tracked. Gives us an opportunity to see where we're coming from and where we're going. So, personal preference. But I think key to all of this is understanding that, like any strategic planning, these documents need to be live. They need to be part of what we bring to the table each and every time we meet together. So, and also to remember that this is just one part of a very big planning process that's coming to us as well. So acknowledge the hard work that's gone into it so far, and thank you for that, and look forward to going on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. We have a mover and Councillor Faulkner and a seconder and Councillor Dowsing. All those in favour? Against? Carried. I'll take us to page 42. Right, I'll hand this over to our Madam C.
So through the chair, what you have in here is a review of our 2018 Fostering Māori and Participation in Council Decision Making, which is, as we've pointed out in this report, a requirement of the Local Government Act to demonstrate and to provide ways to foster that participation in decision making. One of the key points, I think, that apart from the minor spelling typo in the front, yes, you will, is just to note that this is has been a light touch review, a tidy up, and that we, through the process, our intention is to work with iwi Māori to co-create a new policy as we also work through our anti-racism journey.
Cool. Thank you, Madam C. Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move the recommendation as it appears on page 43. The Chief Executive just explained what the process is and the process going forward, so the document is as it stands for now. Thank you.
So moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Brown. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I'd like to ask why the decision for bilingual headings versus bilingual versions? It seems that we're going to make that a genuine objective, then we should have a Reo version of this document as well as an English version.
Come out of the next process.
Councillor Warsnop.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just frantically trying to write down all my notes so that I don't get lost in my. There was one bit that I wasn't sure I understood. And if I just move this over, it's going to let me. It is on page, sorry, it's slow, 50, page 50, where it talks about council's activities span a broad range of ideas and the. That's not it, sorry, this is being very difficult. Here we go. 50. Ki te mātauranga, council recognises that tangata whenua have embodied expertise and skills. I just wasn't sure whether it was embodied, like what, or is it supposed to be embedded? I wasn't sure what that meant, and whether or not, if someone wanted to interpret that for me. And I think just lifting it up a level, this is there something that goes with this as well, or sits above it in terms of a policy? Because I see what we're trying to do with this in terms of, you know, we want to engage in a way that is, you know, mutually, we're each getting what we want from the outcomes, right? That it's not last minute, oh, and what do you think about this? I can see where that's going, but at sort of the very beginning of where you end up having to use a policy like this, is there something that tries to align strategically? Typically you end up consulting on the things where you don't know that you're already on the same page, right? And I guess if I think about Tamanuhiri having brought into us their strategic documents and how a lot of what they have in there was already, like, you know, it was very much in the same vein of what council was trying to do, and there's an area where potentially we didn't have much crossover. I'm just trying to understand how we get to the point where we know where they're trying to go and they know where we're trying to go, so that when we're applying this engagement policy, it's for stuff where we're less familiar with each other. Like, do you see where I'm trying to?
Kind of, through the chair. No, I mean, I think, and this is a really good example of that, where we try to get to a point where the points of differences are such that we're more similar than not in terms of the outcomes and objectives. When I say this is an example of that, it's because it's been created purely by council and not in that co-creation space. So strategically, which is where things like Te Mana o Te Waioi, our joint management agreement with Te Runanga Nui, is around that co-creation and co-management. So that is probably a different layer, which kind of is related to this, but sits higher than this. And I think in terms of what the Local Government Act was trying to do was to ensure, like, it sets minimum standards and ensure that local authorities do through their business have mechanisms within which would foster that treaty relationship. And so it's a requirement, but I think where council needs to get to is that co-creation around how do iwi and Māori want to be engaged in the business of council without us telling them, and then what does that look like by way of our strategies, policies and plans, and how do we give effect to that? So it's if we take this next round of the TRMP review or our essential freshwater plans, when we step it back, we are having to enter into a co-creation discussion, which isn't necessarily sitting inside this at the moment.
I guess what pointed me at that in that area, and even though, like, I'm not pulling up a page per se, is in our reports there's always the Māori engagement bit, and usually it's there has been no engagement, there will be engagement, further down the track. Whereas in actual fact, the body of the report has drawn on a lot of things that we know about our past experiences or about what different organisations have shared with us. So it's built on something, the report itself, it just isn't reflected in that engagement bit, which refers to this. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Boudet.
Thank you. Is not the key area in legal, on the Local Government Act, Resource Management Act 1991 are the key frameworks. Council, sorry, people, page 46, item 17. There are also obligations to Maori governing treaty settlements, conservation, biosecurity, coastal management, flood management, and transport legislation. The key principle which drives these obligations is the treaty wetland. Doesn't that answer all the questions? We're legally obliged.
Kia ora, Uncle Bill. Kia ora, Councillor Boudet. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit more on what Councillor Warstock was discussing, and I think I think I mentioned in the previous paper is that there's a very big distinction between engagement and decision making, And the majority of what you spoke about in your questioning was engagement, understanding the desires of each party. And that's relevant to the previous paper. In relevance to this one, and specifically in effective decision-making, this is how to effectively have a seat at the table, and giving effect to that through our committee structures with joint effort and our with true partnership and participation in those committees is important. But if we don't see that, if we don't see any delegated authority into those committees, then actually we risk breaking that decision making or providing the opportunity for decision making when it comes to council and going against desires of that committee. So we need to, so when we're workshopping this, it's around those governance agreements, it's around giving effect to partnerships within council or governance decision-making in this room and at this table, two very different topics. And whilst engagement feeds decision-making needs to be a priority of its own, and giving effect to Māori to participate is very different to consulting or engaging.
It's still an and.
It is
right?
an
You
and.
guys are both
And I
saying
think,
the same.
the area where the crossover is the definition of success, which in here is our definition. How do we know that that's a shared definition, I guess? Unless you've got that alignment, you don't know what our success definition, which we've got in all of these tables, is the definition that the other party to this would offer, you know. So that's just that alignment before you get to how you implement it. That I was
If it doesn't seem like anyone else is going to ask any questions or make any comments, I'll make a final comment before I put the paper. But what I'm heartened by is the positive intention in regards to the conversations we're having around the table, in regards to Māori engagement, in regards to Māori decision-making, participation in regards to what we're doing inside of council. I do want to touch on something that Uncle Bill pointed out, as Councillor Burdett pointed out, is that we as a council organisation, we are beholden to certain things, primarily LGA, Te Tiriti, RMA, etc., etc. So inside of our policy, it really does have to have that fundamentally at the basis of it. However, and then our partners will have their basis, and then it's trying to build those two different worlds, I guess, to make them connect in that right way. And I think that this and the previous paper are two really crucial cornerstones in order for us to make that happen. So on that kōrero, it's been moved by Councillor Seymour and seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Take us to page 59. It's a charter for the HMNZS Manawa Nui. Oh, sorry. First, thank you very much to staff. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for that.
Happy to move this paper.
Yeah, moved by Councillor Dowsing, seconded by Councillor Faulkner. Any questions? Councillor Faulkner and Councillor Robinson. And yeah, Councillor Faulkner and Councillor Robinson.
For me, it's not so much a question as a comment. Given that the charter has already been granted, I guess for me as a not local, but being welcomed into this region, for me, it's a real chance to celebrate HMNZS Manawa Nui. I knew I was going to trip over that. But not only the ship, but the people who serve on her, and welcoming them into our community. And I think that's really important, that they have their homes that they come from, but equally this is a home for them also. So that was all I wanted to comment on.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner, Councillor Robinson and Councillor Brown.
It's page 62 under paragraph 7. under climate change implications says there are no climate change implications or impacts from this matter. Sort of raises in my mind the question of what lens we put on when we think about assessing the climate change. Here's an opportunity where you have a massive consumer of fuels. No doubt the ship creates a lot of waste, a lot of rubbish. I don't think there are no climate change implications from having this formal relationship with this ship. We could, for example, develop an import recycling program with them. We could identify waste and carbon reduction steps with them when they're in port. There's opportunities in this relationship which could have a positive impact on climate change. So I think it's a disservice to say there are no opportunities or implications arising from this paper. I see it as an opportunity, as I do every big decision we make. So that's my point. And the second point I make is, when I looked at the charter, it just looks unbelievable. The document itself, it just looks unbelievably monocultural. And it kind of surprises me in this day and age that it looks like something that's come out of the 1800s. Even the language in it, and I know it's a traditional style document, but in this community, in this day and age, I would have thought there would be something less monocultural. That's my thoughts.
Councillor Robinson.
I didn't realise I had written this report through the chair. Yeah, it is the Navy's document, and in terms of any kind of climate change initiatives, I'm sure the Honourable Prime Minister would be keen to know more about that, and she, having been the one that also blessed the boat, so it is the ship. So it is acknowledged. It is, and they are steeped in tradition. But I will say that when previous mayor and I went up to with the symbol of command and the Māori with Sir Derek Lardeli and their team, they are very steeped in tradition and Te Ao Māori as well. So that was quite impressive just in terms of that side. But also I just want to say that the crew that are on Manuanui, many of them do whakapapa te Ngāti Porou. So just FYI.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Councillor Carter-Brown.
I guess for me, I was laughing a little in that the previous two documents were around significant engagement as well as Māori involvement, and then you get on this respect, there's been no tangata whenua Māori engagement, and there's no community engagement, and yet it's quite a significant thing to have this huge ship come to port. So I know when I read through it that we're talking about government. This has been set before us, and we should all be wonderfully grateful for being chosen. But again, I feel like we go into a space where this is probably where a little bit of our community does get blindsided or confused, the contradiction of sorts, but it's out of our hands. It's legitimately not our call decision we didn't get to be a part of a big hui to discuss this. So I just think sometimes we have to let our community know that, because when we see in reports that, we are working harder to be engaging and asking about significance, and this to me is, and then of course tangata whenua, as our CEO has mentioned, there has been Māori, kōrero, etc. But it's those kind of times where I feel like we've just trying to say there will be some people that will just be so in love with this, that they've been collecting ships and been following the historical framework of our Navy, and they will just be so over the moon. But there'll be others that will be thinking of the war, the death, the loss, all of that. So it's those significant layers that we have in community that I just want them to be aware. Some things we take on board because of our central government relationship. So much so, but that's where I was sitting with this paper, other than recognising its wonderful opportunities. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Carter-Brown. Councillor Seymour.
going to say anything at all, but it's forced me to come and say, sometimes we just have to lift ourselves up a little and actually recognise that we are actually picking up something that has been bestowed upon us. To pick up the Chief Executive's comment, many of the crew are tangata whenua, many come from this region, and we should look at it in a positive light. Think of the young people that get a real buzz out of the opportunity to go aboard a naval ship that seldom comes here. So just let's think of it positively. And
Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
it's an opportunity that has been provided to us. It was signed off ages ago. It's just taken a while for the ship to come.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Councillor Woolsnott.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce Pat's point, and this is almost entirely ceremonial. We have absolutely no influence on the ship whatsoever. It is, and I think beholden on us to provide a home port, which it's likely to spend very little time in, to be fair. But really, it's more about a recognition probably for our region, and that somebody's tried to do us an honour, the Prime Minister likely, and reading too much into the influence that we might be able to have on that vessel, I think would be a bit of a stretch.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woolsnott. If there are no other comments, I'd like to make a final comment. I'm very grateful that Gisborne has been chosen as the port for Manawanui. My family have a long history of service. Some of my uncles served on a submarine that actually was, that did come to the port, and I was grateful that I got to jump on that submarine and go over look. I've had other uncles that have been on other Navy ships, so I'm quite chuffed that Manawanui has been bestowed upon our port here. I do want to acknowledge the points that Councillor Kratzer-Brown made also in regards to war, which is generally felt, and I've heard other people speak to those in our community, that it is momo tangata, it is a waste of people. However, there's also a long prideful, I guess, tradition of service that weave through a lot of whānau, Māori whānau up and down this coast, non-Māori whānau up and down this coast and around our country. On that note, I did want to see if Jenny wanted a final right of reply. Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Dowsing, seconded by Councillor Faulkner. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. I'll move us to page 64, which is the Chief Executive's report. A lot of these things in the report we are abreast of, but on that note, I'll take the. Were there any comments you want to make first? Otherwise, I'll take the report as read. Moved by Councillor Burdett.
Seeing this program develop, and where they've got the trees off the roads, that country, and then having seen some of it delivered to the old people around our district. In fact, quite a bit of it gets cut back here. But it's a very good program. I just worry a little with the end of the funding, what will happen to those people. Because they've certainly had very good training.
That's a very good point.
Right across the board. And then if we go to page.
Should we get C to respond to that first point, Uncle Bill?
So through the chair, we've been working with MSD, and they are, for those that haven't been able to be redeployed into full-time employment or other job opportunities, they are looking at some bridging support over that Christmas period to provide them with some income. There is a care group that Mr. James Beatty sits on for council with other representatives from organisations that's looking at skills development and training. And so some of the people also might come through any avenues and opportunities through that pathway. There's a number of other initiatives happening jobs for the environment too, where people that have got those skills may be able to redeploy. So there's a concerted effort from officers of various agencies trying to look at how we can support people that are coming off the redeployment program.
And now, page 78, focus projects. Firstly, acknowledge the staff support the board Park in terms of the development that has happened there. It's been amazing for 20 years, nothing now suddenly. It's been upgraded, and we have people from Wellington alongside council staff working hard to further upgrade the park. Public convenience is certainly, if you think about what's happened at Korekahiga, it might be 20 years, but it's now a development that happened, I think, following the CEO's report. CEO's coming to a meeting up there, we got action, and there's a toilet in place, but the staff that worked on that, and we've had quite a number, should be complimented. And then the bottom part of it, in terms of the township and community plans, finally, we are having the upgrade of Korekahiga, Jarrell and Ticketing. Plus, they're looking at the playgrounds, and bear in mind, all those playgrounds have to have outside funding. So that in itself is a task. If we go to page 82, at the bottom of it, Waipa River Phase 2 erosion control. There's been a lot of work done in terms of debris dams, pole planting. Our main staff member, Kerry Hudson, has been very, very involved. And all in all, they've done a great job. But look at the amount of funding that they've managed to secure. Just amazing. That's me. Well done to the CEO and her staff.
Thank you, Uncle Bill. Any other questions? Councillor Worsnop, then Councillor Cranston, then Councillor Singh.
Thank you. So first question was on page 71 in relation to the freshwater reforms and the fact that farm plans are mandatory. And I wanted to ask if we've got a work stream or could we have something come back to us, because I know there's a lot of I guess, anxiety in the rural community around where this is going, capacity issues, what's going to be required when. And I think that's becoming quite urgent that we front foot some of that and at least have ourselves a plan, because the process of getting a farm environment plan with the current capacity that exists in our community is going to take quite a long time. And at the moment I feel like we're probably on the back foot a little bit because locally we don't have a lot of capacity and we also have very little certainty. So that was, my more of a point than a question. On 73, we may have covered this and I've just forgotten it. We had a deputation about engine braking and we are doing the traffic and parking bylaw. Did we agree that engine braking didn't fall into the traffic and parking bylaw, or was there another means of us addressing the engine braking issue that those residents were at their wits' end about? And then I've just got one more question.
Yeah, through the chair, Scott, sorry, just respond to the first one in terms of the freshwater policy reform. So we will provide an update. Probably I'll have to just look at the schedule as to which committee we can make that to. But nationally, everyone's struggling around how to practically implement that, which is one part of the regional sector. Mayors and chairs asked the chief executives to go and work up some fundamental different models of how we could arrange ourselves in that area. So we'll bring something back on that. And just in terms of engine braking, my understanding was that we were going to include that as part of the bylaw. Yeah. So it was discussed, but I don't think there was any kind of formal commitment that was made to it. But I recall it being discussed at one of the meetings, and we said we would look at bringing that into the bylaw.
All right, that's good to hear. Thank you. My last question was just on the monitoring bores in Tolaga Bay. I just what are we monitoring? That's obviously a project I don't think that's come to, or that I don't have any knowledge of. Are we monitoring aquifers, or are we finding aquifers, or what is that to do with?
So through the chair, we are, so my understanding, and then Mr. Bunting can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we are looking at the aquifers in the Uawa area. There is another project that's coming to us, which Dr. Cave spoke about, I think he referenced the other week, with regards to further mapping of aquifers across the region. So the PGF worked in partnership with GNS, and I was approached the other week to see if we were interested in that. So we're starting to do the first case, the first investigation of that. The second part might require some co-funding, which we would have to have a conversation if we needed to put contribution towards that. The project's underway in Northland. I understand they put about $3 million from central government funding into that project. So it's like a LiDAR map, but for aquifers, and yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Worsnop. We have Councillor Cranston and Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, thanks for that. Page 78, the community facilities. I have seen the draft because of my work on Sport Gisborne and also legacy from community development. Looks awesome. We've been talking about hubs forever, and you know, the fact that there might be a bit of forward momentum there is pretty encouraging to me. When it notes river sports, we're very aware of just how difficult this area is, and it's not so much getting facilities for the vehicles themselves, it's just the capacity of the rivers, especially with the likes of Rome, which requires incredible length, width, I mean, to accommodate the vessels and that. So there are going to be ongoing problems with river sports, which we're really scratching our heads with. But as far as hubbing goes, it's been absolutely identified as the best models for sporting facilities and that. The only downside is there's a huge dollar figure put in front of it, so that's going to be a challenge for us. With the noting here of the short list there, I did think that the old Wadi site was taken off the list because of the private ownership not being interested at all, so I don't think that's in there anymore.
Thank you, Councillor Cranston, Councillor Seymour, and Councillor Sheldrake, and Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much to the Chief Executive for the report. Just a supplementary to Councillor Worsnop's question around farm plans. It is quite a significant issue, and we've got not only councils with a regulatory role, but we have beef and lamb and we have federated farmers, all with an interest. And it would be really useful if all parties could get together so that there becomes one model or blueprint or template, because at the end of the day, it can't be all that different because councils are never going to monitor it. So we need some kind of consistent template. It is quite a big piece of work and it's going to take some time, but it does need to be explored, ideally by with a contribution from the other parties. Beef and lamb do have funds that they're putting into it, so it would be good if either subcommittee that was interested in here that could, of councillors and parties outside of council, could work on that, because it's going to impact quite substantially across our whole district. And from time to time, individuals in the farming community talk about it, and in trying to pursue it with one or the other of those agencies, as well as ourselves, everybody has got a reason why they can't advance it at the minute, because they're waiting for changes to happen, they're waiting for more guidance. Beef and lamb were asked if they had a template. No, someone in there's working on that some more. So we're going to have 3 different types of documents if we're not careful. So some consistency, even at a national level, which something you might be able to raise at regional councils, because everybody across the country is going to be in the same boat. So that's just an observation around that. With respect to the item 3 on page 71, a central government update around the 3 water reform, and I see that you know, we know that there's a talk about this 11 million, and we know we signed an agreement with Hawke's Bay Regional Council that we'd work with them. But apart from that, I don't think this council knows much about the detail. And I see the last sentence on that paragraph under 3 says that once the modifications have been incorporated, a revised version of the delivery plan will be submitted by 31 October, which is like a couple of days away. It would seem reasonable that that might be shared with us at maybe the next Sustainable Taurāwhiti meeting or something like that, because I think we'd all be interested in what it might look like.
I'll get Mr. Wilson to make further commentary and shortly, and would be also useful if give them a heads up on our wonderful information request that we've had that the team have been working on. Can I just go quickly back to Councillor Cranston? I can confirm that the Watties side is off the list. Just had an email through, and in terms of the consistent template, there is some work being done at a national level with a subcommittee of the chief executives, and I understand that they're trying to negotiate what a template might look like. Obviously, there might be some tension through that, but that's my understanding, is that there is a subcommittee. So I can report back on that. We've got a meeting next week around where everything is at with the regional CEs.
Thank you. That needs to
Councillor,
happen.
oh, sorry.
I did have a couple of other questions, so you're going to ask Mr. Wilson first. Thank you.
So through the chair, we have been going backwards and forward with our Crown infrastructure funders over the last month. They've had some minor questions and things that they wanted us to clarify through that process. So the delivery plan is close to being completed. We're just waiting for some direction from them for the last part of that. The other part, as the chief executives alluded to, we have been requested by DIA a substantial amount of information regarding our Three Waters infrastructure, our assets, the way we deliver things, and everything that's there. When I say that, we're talking 2,000 lines of an Excel spreadsheet that our team has to complete within a month to return back to DIA. So it's a significant workload, not just for our Three Waters teams, but also for finance and for a number of other teams as well, that we're going to need to get all of that information back. So there is a substantial workload coming, and the information is part of the keys that unlock the 11.04 million. So it's something that we have to do. So there is a big requirement that is coming back to us as part of that $11 million, regardless of our project planning and delivery planning as well.
Microphone, Councillor Seymour.
Would it be reasonable for councillors to actually see what the plan looks like? I mean, this is something that's being developed on behalf of this district to over, what is a government initiative and a Three Waters reform program. But I would have thought that we might have got to see that.
So you approved what we put up.
Yes,
what
that you
the next
signed
level
the
of
deal to
detail will
talk with-
be quite technical, but I don't see why staff would hold that information. We can just circulate that on Docs on Tap when that comes available.
That would be good. Thank you very much. When I'm referring to this document that's alluded to here in the last paragraph. And then I just wanted a more general question, because I think we might all benefit from the answer with respect to the planning for the LTP, which turns up in here somewhere. When are we going to have, we've cancelled some workshops and that's fine, and your council officers have drawn together a lot of information from a few meetings. When are you going to have a first tranche of something that looks like the LTP that councillors might see? And could you just talk us through what the next steps are going to be and when they're going to happen? Thank you.
So you will be pleased to know, Councillor Seymour, that next week we have our scheduled workshop with you. I think we have a whole day on the 5th, Thursday the 5th of November, where you will be presented with so kind of how everything's coming together, opportunities, a reminder around your financial strategy, and then we start flowing into all your priorities, and we start flowing into scenarios like as we did 3 years ago when we had different options around this is what X buys you, this is what, so, and then you will give us guidance as to where, whether we've kind of hit the mark in terms of those priorities and the key projects that you want to come forward, and then we will share percentage rates with you as well at that workshop. So it'll all start coming together next week.
And so thank you very much. That's really helpful. So will we have it before the day to look at it, or and I'm not arguing whether that's good or bad, but I'm just asking, Will we have it before the day?
You'll
to
have
look at?
some information before the day. You won't have all the information because there's a lot that we will need to talk through. Otherwise, it's a workshop, so we really want that engagement and dialogue flowing, and so you'll get some background information, but not everything.
Great, thanks very much. That's helpful.
Any other questions, Councillor
No, I'm
Seymour?
just looking to see whether there's any more. No, that'll be fine. Thank you for the moment. Thanks very much for the.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Seymour. We have Councillor Sheldrake, Akuhata Brown, then Faulkner.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the Waddy site, and I take it that Gisborne Golf Park is the Park Golf Club, is it? On page 78?
Yeah.
And just wondered, does this come to mind too? Is the sublease of Midway Surf Club been sorted?
Through the chair, I don't know. I'd have to follow that up.
Don't know.
Councillor Akuhata Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, community facilities, you kind of talk about them lots over the tenure of your role in council. And Papawhareki was a considerable considered space to talk about Waikirikiri. And I know there was a lot of money that paid for project management to oversee that. Is that helpful? I mean, in respect to those involved in this space, we worked really hard as a collective committee to undertake, interviewing multiple sports codes. And there's a lot of data collected. I mean, I've still got boxes of it in my house. In respect to that determinants, and there was a lot of anti because of the position of a lot of Kai-T stigma. If you like, I remember sitting in meetings and constantly hearing, oh, we can't have it there because it'll get wrecked. That was kind of like some people's thoughts. And we've always debated resource infrastructure in certain parts of our region are lower, less in respect to what is there. And so, I think there's an opportunity that exists to even up their kind of play respective to infrastructure in this region. And so I bet that I'm putting a plug in for the work that was done by a lot of people respective to Papawhareki. Most of you know it well. $1 million was even given into that space at one time. So staff got that kind of data to hand, because it would just seem to me, well, it's useful information. There was so much data collected from the neighbourhood, from sports codes, from so much that I just think it would be wonderful to have that at the hands of those looking into Hub. We're so grateful when the softball pitch diamond was put in place. It was just magic. And of course, the park, the community engagement that happened to get that beautiful playground up there. So I just wondered about Papawhareki's role, being that it's, and it's not in play right now, but there was a lot of information gathered that could be, I believe, helpful. So that was my first query, was to that hub kōrero, Nadine, just around Papawhareki.
Yes, so through the chair, you may recall, some of you won't, but the council did pay for that business case for Papawhareki.
That's right, yeah.
So that information is useful. Mr. White, who's been part of the facilities team with Sport Gisborne Tairāwhiti and Trust Tairāwhiti, has certainly got that information and it's been applied there. And then, sorry, just quickly going back to the restaurant sublease, no, that has not been resolved, and I don't have a time frame with regard to that.
And I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to go up to Wainake. That was a wonderful, page 80 gives us a bit more about that transformation program. That day was really special to be a part of, so thank you for that, and looking forward to the onflow of restoration in region respective to those types of projects. So thank you. And lastly, it was just regarding the contributions, external funding list there. Fabulous to see a whole range of projects, performances, if you like, even twerking is in the mix. So I just wondered, do we get knowledge of when those activities will be happening? Because I'm feeling that there's some people here that want to check out some twerk, lip syncing and kanikani. So do we as council get given some heads up when those activities will be, if they've been, or how they went, feedback wise? Cool. Just thought I'd just see if anyone's been to any of them and how they went.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Oh, but we still have Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity, based on our conversation, and it is an ongoing conversation around farm environment plans. Is there an opportunity for us as a region to think a bit more strategically, think a bit more high level, and start looking for a primary industries or a land use environmental plan? The reason I say that is because we constantly find ourselves in a situation where varying land uses are competing to get to the bottom almost, rather than competing to get to the top of environmental standard. And particularly in this region, you will find neighbours with quite differing environmental standards, or indeed desires for their land. And when I look at this, I think, well, the reason we're doing this is for the health of our whenua and the health of our waterways, and in particular the health of our marine environment. And everything that we do on our land here impacts on those things. And I can't help wondering whether there's an opportunity to open a conversation. There's nothing stopping us being a leader in this nationally, where you have a land use environmental plan, not just a farm one, but a land use one. And that way you get the opportunity to have neighbours talking to one another about how what they do on their part of the whenua impacts their neighbours, and indeed their neighbours' waterways, and indeed the beaches and the marine environments that we all love and adore in this region. Well, the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan might be quite a long way away, and it just might give us an opportunity to start a conversation.
Is the opportunity for us to discuss that when you bring the other stuff?
Yeah, there
around the
is.
farm, environment?
I think there is, but I just, my reservation would be, I mean, there's opportunities everywhere in terms of, you know, where the council wants to lead. My reservation is that we don't have the current resources to deliver on our current work program, let alone add to something that's quite in terms of a strategic conversation. So I would suggest that you know, very much land use is part of the TRMP review. We've got a position that we had externally funded with MPI. My understanding is that vacancy is now filled, which will be helping looking strategically at region land use. So it might be, yeah, I think we can have that conversation in the paper, but that's my reservation is around initiating something. There's an expectation that we would then follow through on, yeah, and then the council will need to work out again, what's the priority here? Is it around the TRMP and implementation of which I would say a central freshwater package, by which we need to have our catchment plans in place by 2024. That's legally required. So what drops off in that, and who then has those conversations, who's available to do that?
I guess my point being that is it the opportunity to partner with the likes of MPI and others, bearing in mind that we don't have the resources currently to, as I say, comply exactly with what we're required to already. I would prefer us to think big in this environment rather than think smaller and smaller. And I'm just putting it out there purely as a thought going forward. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's a discussion to have when we have the farm environment plan conversation, rather than under the CEO's program of works convo. I do have Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask around the community facilities as well, which we seem to be getting a disproportionate amount of knowledge around the table, and in terms of how it's currently progressing. So it may be time for a more significant update on that to us. But I'm not sure at what stage the feedback from the workshops will be incorporated into it. That's probably the likely time to see it. But in terms of our governance decisions around that, I think there's some conversations to be had around, if this is successful, what of our current recreational facilities become redundant, or like sports fields become redundant, and long-term thinking around around use of those facilities or retirement or whatever it may be of some of those areas. So yeah, it'd just be good to get something on the cards for the future to understand current position, our desired outcomes, and what negative effects those outcomes may cause, well, not negative, but what corresponding outcomes those that may cause if we're successful.
Yep, so through the chair, there is an update scheduled to come to council before Christmas.
Thank you. Anyone, if there's not, I'm going to let Councillor Worsnop have one more very quick short go.
My very quick point was just that we do have a work stream around land use capability. Kerry Hudson's been beavering away at it for probably decades. But the LiDAR is going to add to that hugely. And just to make the distinction, and I have reservations about mashing them all together into an FEP. I think we have 3 tiers which need to feed back and feed forward constantly. That's your land use capability, which is going to influence your catchment plans, which is going to talk to your farm environment plans, because the plans are ultimately really they're a management tool, and they need to be something that we get uptake from voluntarily, so we're not chasing everyone around with a big stick. So just to be mindful that we do have work streams currently. They're just, our catchment plans and our land use capability are still, there's a big body of work to come through before they're very useful to our farm environment plans.
Thank you, Councillor Worsnop. I have a mover for the C's report and Councillor Burdett, and a second and Councillor Sheldrake. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. I want to take us to this late item. It is the appointment of, so moved by Councillor Cranston, seconded by Councillor Seymour. It's to confirm the appointment of Councillor Worsnop as a member of the Wastewater Management Committee, effective immediately.
Do we have to vote on it?
Yes, I think we do have to raise our hands because it's a person that we're appointing. Yeah, you got to vote for yourself. Yes, it is unanimous. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. This ends the public part of our council meeting. I'd like to, prior to moving into public excluded, I'd like to thank those who've been in attendance online. I'd like to thank the media for being here. I'd like to thank staff for the amount of work you've put in today, and also the councillors for our robust and great and contributing discussions. So moved into public excluded by Councillor Burdett, seconded by Councillor Faulkner. All those in favour? Against?